Good morning, everybody. If you happen to be walking along the beach at Coney Island, right off of Brooklyn, on this date, June 16 in 1884, you would have noticed a strange contraption that looked a lot like two wooden railroad trestles right next to each other. Well, it was called the Switchback Railroad, and it was the first roller coaster at Coney Island. Coney Island is attached to Brooklyn. It was a real island a long time ago, but because of landfill, it's now attached. And for a long time, it was just a sand spit. But in the 1870s, the Hotel Brighton set up shop there, and it was a big resort. So people started going to Coney for vacation. They would go up a big tower like this. This had first been in Philadelphia, and then somebody moved it so they could get a nice view of the area. And then our event happened on June 16 in 1884. The Switchback Railway was the first roller coaster at Coney. So you would get on a car and go one way and then get off the car, walk across the platform and go back. And people thought that was a lot of fun. And right next to it was the Elephantine Colossus, which you could go in, and it was an attraction, and it was often seen by immigrants before they saw the Statue of Liberty. Well, there were three big parks at Coney, and this was the first one, Steeplechase Park. It got its name from the steeplechase ride, where people sat on mechanical horses and went around a mechanical racetrack. And other rides were added, and eventually they added the parachute jump, where you'd actually use a real parachute to fall to the ground. The second amusement park was Luna Park, and this had all kinds of strange architecture, and it was sort of a bizarre place. And it had rides too, like this one called Shoot the Chutes. You would shoot down a rail and go splashing into the water, and people thought that was great. But it had some stuff's a little unsettling, like this place where you would go in and just look at babies in incubators. That was something that people liked to do. It's a bit bizarre. And the third big park was Dreamland. This had over 1 million electric bulbs. The tower in the middle there had a big searchlight that ships in New York Harbor would see. And Dreamland was supposed to be classy. So here's the entrance with this sort of fake Greek statuary. But you would go to Dreamland to be uplifted. You would go to learn. So it had things like this, Filipino tribesmen who had their own little village, and you would just watch them do whatever they do. Or you might go to this place, which had over 300 what they called midgets, and you just look at these people. So this idea of humans on display is part of that era, and it's just how they did things. And this supposedly is Sigmund Freud. So Freud visiting Dreamland. You could get a lot of mileage out of that idea. So here's where the three big parks were. Steeplechase was on the left, Luna in the back, Dreamland on the right. They were together for about 7 years in the early 1900s. And because of the railroad, so many people could get to Coney. Here's over 1 million people on a summer weekend, bathing and just hanging out. So it was pretty popular. Well, in 1911, Dreamland burned. Welder's torch led to a spark, and because of so much wood and lath and things, it just burned really, really fast. And then Luna Park burned during World War II. So Steeplechase, the original, was also the longest survivor, and it lasted until the mid-60s. And here's a picture of people on the horses in the 1950s. A few years ago, Dorothy and I went down to Coney Island just to see what's there and what's left, and there were people there, not 1 million, but people at the beach. And there is a boardwalk. Most of it's quite new. It's been, fixed up a bit. I guess it was really run down in the 70s and the 80s. And the parachute jump is still there. They're not using it as a ride because I think it's way too dangerous, but that's a relic from those early days. And for us in Worcester County, we can go to Coney Island Hot Dogs up in Worcester, a reminder of the great park in Metro New York City.